Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another vlog. People seem to like these, so I'm going to continue to do them as long as I have stuff to ramble about. I admit it does somewhat cut into some of the other things I've been intending to do, like the RPG Storytime. These have basically become a little bit of a dumping ground for my RPG Storytime stuff, which I would normally put in its own video. But hey, what can you do? I will probably go ahead and try and get some more RPG Storytimes up pretty soon. Anyway, I want to start off with this vlog by thanking all my subscribers. I have just hit 1,500, and while that's not a huge amount, it is a decent amount for me. I've been growing at a slow but steady pace for some time now, and I am pleased to continue that growth rather than see a sort of retreat. I will say that I have heard loud and clear those people who've suggested I spend way more time putting the word out about my channel and my videos. I do have a plan for that. It's just my schedule, as usual, has been shot to hell. I do intend to go ahead and start doing more outreach, start doing more basically advertising to get more eyeballs on the channel. I do have a plan. I went ahead and researched it. It's not that difficult. It is just time consuming. But thank you all who have subscribe to me. I know that due to the mix of content, sometimes tabletop, sometimes computer, that some people will get really frustrated seeing a bunch come down the line that they're not really interested in. And some people will become very interested or very, very aggravated with me not putting out things for a couple days simply because my real life gets in the way. This is not my day job by a long shot. I do this as I would like it to be a day job at some point, but I'm in a niche channel, in a niche kind of thing. RPGs are popular, but it takes a special kind of RPG channel to go ahead and actually make a full-time living off of it, and I'm nowhere near that. So, but I do appreciate all my people and all of my viewers, and I do spend what time and resources I can on the channel. I wish I could spend more. I really wish I could spend more. And I will continue to look for ways to spend more resources and time on my channel. It's been pretty hell the last few months. I'm hoping that it's getting past. But again, every time I say I'm hoping it's getting past it, Anyway, I'm rambling. That's not what I wanted to ramble about. I wanted to go ahead and talk about a couple things. I'm kind of thinking this vlog's kind of cursed, because I wanted to record this vlog like 2 weeks ago, and I actually recorded it. And those who have been watching my channel recently know that my hard drive, my main hard drive on my render computer where I put all of my stuff, completely crapped out. Now, I have since actually got the drives to replace it. I actually got 2 drives to replace. I got one to put in here and one to put in my main system where I can go ahead and gather more footage, which should really help. I've got them installed. I did manage to pull but I managed to pull a large number of files off of my old shot hard drive. Not all of them, unfortunately, which means I'm going to have to go ahead and record this again. I had actually recorded it a second time, but I got about midway through recording it, and I got so many interruptions that it was just, I couldn't pick it up where I left off. So I decided to just go ahead and scrap it, start anew when I have time, and now I have time. I hope. It's like 3 in the morning right now, so if I get interrupted this time, I'm going to throw a fit. Anyway, wanted to talk about a couple topics, aside from the 1,500 subs, which actually happened since I actually recorded it, so hey, that's a good thing. I had that to mention. I wanted to talk about OSR games, and I wanted to talk about some other things that have been going on, and some of them, most of them RPG related, some of them not. So when I get to the point that's not RPG related, I'll go ahead and let you know so you can shut the video off, whatever. Alright, let's talk about OSR stuff. Now, those of you who have been following me for a while know that I was intending to do a State of the OSR video as the last closing video for my Tabletops and Taverns last season, which I need to start the new season, but it was a couple months. It was a couple months ago at this point. And I got into it, and I realized that a lot of the things that I was intending to state in the video just actually were not 100% So I put that video on hold to do some more research, and the more I researched, the more I kind of got this idea that the whole topic of that video was not something I wanted to approach at that point. Now, I've recently got a few people who are fans of the OSR watching my channel, and I do a lot, well, I don't do a lot, but I do some OSR style content. I want to say flat out that I do not consider myself an OSR guy, even though in fact, I love the old editions of like D&D and its various competitors at the time, like Tunnels and Trolls and such. I love a lot of the new systems that have come out that seek to replicate that old play style. A lot of times in the better ones, actually cleaning it up without making it modern, which means it's more approachable to some people. But I still don't consider myself an OSR guy because I do play all the new stuff as well, and I don't take sides except 4th edition. I think those of you who know my channel know my. Don't worry, 4th edition will have its reckoning when I get to that point of my D&D retrospective. But those of you who've been watching my channel, I'll play the new stuff just as happily as I'll play the old stuff. I'll play stuff that's not even close to D&D just as happily, with some not so happily, as I will the old D&D stuff. So I don't really consider myself a hard and fast OSR guy, even though I do appreciate the style. I love the style, and I try to incorporate some of the OSR style into some of my new edition games. And so I don't really consider myself an OSR expert, but what I do consider myself as is an outside set of eyeballs on the community that isn't a complete stranger to the community, but can look at it objectively. So what I'm about to say may not jive with some people, but I have been reviewing a lot of OSR games because I get sent a lot of OSR games to review as part of my review series, and I also take a look at some OSR games just to play. And I have really kind of been wondering if we haven't reached market saturation with the OSR thing in terms of systems. I want to qualify that. And a lot of people actually I'm seeing kind of agree with me, because I get a lot of comments that whenever I review an OSR stuff, they're like, oh, OSR making the system, making the same game over and over and over again. And to a point, that's true. And even I noticed it like a while back, and it just got to the point where people were actually just making the same game over and over again. And part of that is that there's a certain subset of the OSR community that believes that deviation from the systems that the old school replicas and the old school systems themselves implemented, any deviation against that was not considered OSR by that subset. And those were, I guess we can call them the purist gatekeepers that believed that everything needed to cleave to those old systems as closely as possible, and everything else was just like an art project or whatever. And then there are a certain group of the OSR community that feels free to experiment very wildly and considers their things part of the OSR, even though they may be significantly different. As long as they capture that same feel, that same kind of outlook, they consider themselves OSR. Where I lie on that thing is that, yeah, I consider those games that do not necessarily clone an old system, but that still capture that feel, I consider those OSR. Even if they use certain modern developments, or they go a little bit outside of the box, like DCCRPG, or even God, I even want to say Dungeons and Delvers, which I covered, which is a 4th edition hack. I consider that OSR because it captures that feel in a lot of ways. Don't particularly think it's, very, very OSR, but I consider it in that same wheelhouse there. So I'm actually pleased to see when a new OSR system comes out that's not just the same game, just with a slightly different rule set. And I believe that other fans of the OSR movement, or actual fans of the OSR movement, I'm a fan of the OSR movement, but I don't consider myself part of the movement. I believe that people that are actually in the trenches are seeing this too, as evidenced by the Swords and Wizardry Continual Light, which deviated rather significantly from the D&D old school rules while still capturing the same feel and flavor. It looked like the same game, but it was not the same game. So I strongly think that is very healthy for the OSR movement. One might say, gotta remember, I'm also a computer gaming guy. It's very similar to what we've got in the roguelike sphere historically. For those who don't know, I'm not necessarily talking about the new roguelike games, although that's part of it. I'm talking about historically roguelikes were a series of role-playing games that kind of derived from the game Rogue, which is a very old randomized permadeath dungeon kind of game, dungeon crawling kind of game. And then you had various variations that sought to capture, to either clone the old Rogue or to clone it plus add something. And I think where the OSR movement needs to go is to follow that logical development. And instead of just rehashing, instead of all roguelikes just rehashing the original Rogue, all of these roguelikes, Hack, Angband, Adam, NetHack, they all kind of branched out and started this whole genre that maybe it wasn't super popular, but it flourished to the point where we now see games that are modern coming out that want to capture that whole feel and call themselves roguelike. And I think the OSR, I actually think where it's moving is something like that, where you've got your different camps of derivatives. You've got your Swords and Wizardry, you've got your Labyrinth Lord, you've got your Blue Home, that each focuses. I mean, you got your, I could go on. Don't get upset if I didn't mention your favorite OSR game. They're there. I just don't want to spend all night listing them. But you've got your camps that kind of develop around these things, and each system either A, polishes off a direct clone of an actual different version of the old D&D rules, or more likely captures that and then builds on it. So you've got all these like forks. You've got these forks, these variations, and I actually think that's healthy for the industry overall, because it does get people thinking new ideas. And then, of course, the next step forward is, I believe that we're already seeing the beginning of this, is that actual modern games start taking cues from that and start bringing those elements into modern gaming systems. And I want to say you're already seeing the start of that in D&D 5th edition. Yeah, I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for that, but they at least had that hand out saying, okay, we're going to try to bring some elements from the old school games into the modern game. Purists may hate it. A lot of OSR people may hate it, but a lot of OSR people that I've seen actually don't mind D&D 5th edition, because it does at least try to take those elements. And I think that's just like the first stage. You're probably going to see a lot of, not necessarily a lot of, because there aren't exactly a lot of role playing systems, modern role playing systems, compared to, say, the computer role playing games where you have a whole plethora of things out there. But I think that you're going to see a lot more callbacks to the old school systems, in large part thanks to the plethora of actual OSR clones that came out there. And I think that the synergy between those two things coming together is going to be fairly healthy for the industry as a whole. But do I believe, I think that the state of the OSR is in flux. And I think that a lot of people have to recognize the fact that new OSR clones that come out are not going to be super successful unless they do something either brand new and depart from the old purist thing, or do a retro clone that is extremely good. I've really, personally, when I do my RPG News roundups, when I look for new systems to review, if I see an OSR system out there, I honestly am not that interested in them unless they do something new. That having been said, one thing that I wish to see more of, and I actually think that I am seeing more of it in terms of maybe not the OSR as a whole, but in terms of just things coming down the pipeline through RPG Now, Drive Through RPG, even through independent sites. Things I see coming down the pipeline are moving away from a new system and more into, here's some adventures. Here's some stuff that, I wrote for a system but should be good for any OSR system. What I'd like to see is more really, really good and really built up monster books, bestiaries, that sort of thing. I've seen a couple of them, but only a couple that are really, really, really have a lot of monsters. I see a bunch of stuff with like a dozen or so monsters. I'm looking for stuff that would be at least as thick as the old monster manuals. Maybe take the second edition, and I'm going to take some flack on that too, but like take the second edition idea and put out these collections of creatures with a common theme, and they're just really, really beefy collections that are collections of spells that have that old school feel, but they aren't just, they aren't just rehashes of the same thing, or maybe even collections of magic items that have that old school feel and the old school format, things like that. Accessories. I would love to see more of those. I really would. Or, the adventures. There's a lot of adventures out there that want to do the old school style. Some of them translate better than others. You can't just take an adventure written for a modern game and just slap OSR on it and sub the monsters out. Old school games have a different feel. A lot of it's due to the fact that they focus on treasure gathering. Not all the time, but in a lot of cases, they focus on treasure gathering rather than beating monsters. So you can't just take an old game out and say, okay, just going to change the stats of the monsters and slap it out there. It's not going to work. You got to actually design an adventure with the ideals behind the particular system that you're transferring it in mind, because there is a big difference. Entire encounters, they have different balance ideas. You can't count on monsters or even storyline experience providing the difference between, say, a game designed for swords and wizardry and a game designed for Pathfinder. It's just not going to work. At the end of the game, the experience totals are going to be completely different unless you've taken that opportunity to go ahead and reevaluate, like treasure locations, treasure amount, the amount of enemies in a particular area. And a level 6 Pathfinder or a level 6 D&D 5th edition character is not equal to a level 6 Swords and Wizardry or a level 6 Labyrinth Lord character. Not just in terms of abilities, but in terms of relative abilities. A level 6 Swords and Wizardry character or a level 6 Labyrinth Lord character is weaker compared to a 5th edition 6th level character, but in terms of comparison to other Swords and Wizardry characters, they're that much more powerful than... I hate to say this, but the advancement curve is different, I guess what I'm trying to say. Individually, 5th edition characters are more powerful, but in terms of comparison to similar monsters or other characters of lower level, a 6th level character in Swords and Wizardry or Labyrinth Lord is really powerful compared to, say, like a 1st or a 2nd level character. It's just that much difference, and you've got to take a look at that in your adventure design. I see a lot of people designing adventures that are very, very well put together and consider this and I see some that are just kind of basically ports to try to get as many people to buy it as possible. You can tell the difference. And yeah, I want to see more adventures that are well balanced for old school stuff. I see quite a bit of them. I see quite a bit of them. I actually see more now coming out than I did when I started doing the RPG News Roundup like a year and a half to 2 years ago. And they don't all have to be mega dungeons. They don't all have to be super adventures. You know, just an individual module that's like... And I'm not a big fan of the one-page adventure. I know a lot of people are, but just like an average module that has like between a dozen to 24 pages, gets characters a couple levels, and is good for, say, 4 or 5 nights play. That's all I'd like. You know, I'd like to see that on top of maybe the other accessories. So I guess that's my opinion. Disagree as you will, but I think if you're a designer and you're getting into the OSR movement like now rather than 10 years ago or whatever, I think that'd be your best place to focus. Rather, you know, if you think you're going to do yet another BX clone and be successful about it, unless you're really into unless you come up with something really new, or unless you go out on a limb and depart from the D&D system for the most part, almost entirely, but not quite. Unless you're willing to do that, you're probably not going to be successful at unseating one of the current OSR kings. Even if you do go out, there's no guarantee of success per se, you know, but hey, take the risk if you really want to. If you got that dream, do that dream. But if you're looking to actually get eyes on your product, and just from a sheer marketing point of view, and you're looking to get some name recognition so that later on something that you do may get some views, and may get some people that recognize you from prior projects, then I would recommend, and you want to stick to the OSR stuff and not go into the modern stuff, little bit of a star there, then yeah, I would say do accessories, do adventures, do things that aren't a new system but that are compatible with current systems. And that way you get your name out there, you show that you can design stuff, and then if you've got an idea that you want to come up with for a new system, then you can go ahead and put it out later after already having your design chops out there for people to see, and then you're more likely to go ahead and be a little bit more successful. And of course, there are exceptions. There's lots of exceptions in everything that you do in life. But not everybody's going to do that. Not everybody's going to go out there and put a book out there and get a New York Times bestseller on the first shot. There are people that do, but that's the exception, not the rule. So if you're looking for designing something that's going to be seen by a lot of people, if you're doing it as an artist, just trying, or as a hopeful, just doing it for fun, just getting it out there, then by all means do it. If you're just doing it for fun, then do it. But if you're doing it to try and get people to play it, trying to stand out from the crowd, trying to get eyes on it, then I would say go for accessories. Because accessories, whenever I see an old school bestiary, I get really excited. I go in there and I say, oh wow, this is a new bestiary. 9 times out of 10, I get a little disappointed, because I look in there and there's like maybe 5 monsters. But I'll tell you what that bestiary got that, Retro Clone 432 didn't get, is it got my eyes on that page. It got me to open up the link and take a look at it. So, consider this. I'm a lot of people out there saying, oh, you don't design RPGs. No, I don't. I probably could, but I don't. I'm going to leave that to people who are more talented at that particular design. I'm just calling it from a consumer's point of view. I'm not even from a reviewer's point of view, just from a consumer's point of view. When I go onto a website and I start looking for OSR stuff, if I see another retro clone, I hate to say it, but I skip over a lot of them. And I'm sure there's some really good ones out there that people have recommended to me to take a look at, and I haven't looked at them at first because I am just tired of retro clones. yet another retro clone. I've got stuff that works for me. And I've got stuff that doesn't quite work for me, but I'm willing to take elements out of it. But in terms of adding new systems and such, you got to do something really special in order to catch the eye out of all of the clones out there. So I think market saturation in retro clone systems and OSR systems in general, unless you're way out there, or unless you provide something that not a lot of other people are doing. If you're doing that, then good. But if you're just rehashing the same material, then why not just do an accessory? Anyway. Wow, I don't mean to be down on it. I'm just calling it as I see it. Yeah, man. Oh, you know what I would like to do before I get on to my next target? You know what I would love? And this is a request to designers out there. And I've actually seen a few of these out there, but not many that do like from the ground up. Is I would love to see an OSR solo roguelike kind of thing. And I may get on designing that myself. As I said, I'm not a great RPG designer. My skills lie elsewhere. But I would love to see a book where I could pick it up and have, maybe slim down rules. You could do the whole full OSR rules, but focused on like solo play, either one character or a party run by one person. And then in the same book, see like a random dungeon generation, similar to the ones in the old AD&D books or the ones in the back of some OSR clones that I see, but maybe more fleshed out. Maybe a little bit easier to use and run, so that instead of plotting out like a full dungeon, maybe streamline it a little bit so you can basically play the whole game using randomized dungeons, randomized monsters, randomized treasure, and just basically play it like a pen and paper roguelike. I would actually really like that. And I'm sure that it's been done. Leave me comments below if you've seen it done. I know of a few of them, but leave me comments anyway, just so that I can take a look at them and maybe review a couple that I don't know about in the future. I know you can use I know you can use like Swords and Wizardry and AD&D and stuff like that for that kind of thing, but a lot of those games kind of really, really rely on a DM, and I would like to see like something boiled down to where I can be absolutely fair and just roll the dice and just have fun with it and make decisions on where the character is going, what they're doing, and leave basically a combination. I see mentions of like Mythic, the GM, the Mythic GM GM-less system or whatever that basically simulates a GM. I'd like to see something vaguely like that, but customized for, even if it's just dungeon crawls, like customized for dungeon crawls. That'd be awesome. Anyway, whoa, I have rambled there. Next thing I want to talk about was actually tactics in role-playing games. Tactics in RPGs. And I'm not going to go into specific tactics. This is about the importance of tactics. And I actually got to thinking a bit about this, because for those of you who don't know, I run a D&D game. It's actually 5th edition, but this is entirely applicable to pretty much every role-playing game out there. At least every role-playing game that involves combat out there. I run like a Mega Dungeon style game for my Patreons. And I run a lot of other games too. And usually my games, I don't go all out there like some people that you see on YouTube. Those of you who've been following me along and seeing some of my streams, and actually, that's actually kind of a misnomer, because a lot of the stuff that not a misnomer, it's kind of a little bit misleading, because a lot of the stuff that I put up on my channel is actually me just running like pre-existing content that somebody else wrote. But I run the occasional adventure, and sometimes I mix my own things in there. And a lot of my combats, not all of them, but they can be somewhat challenging simply because I don't level cap things. I put monsters in places, and if somebody goes into an area, it may be above their pay grade. And sometimes they'll focus on stuff that is at their pay grade, but like just at their pay grade, so they're going to go in there and be very challenged by it. And then sometimes they'll just go ahead and hit something and just steamroller it and just keep going. Now, what does this have to do with tactics and RPGs? I have found myself looking at some of my games, and I really started thinking about it during one of my Patreon games, where the party experienced an almost total wipe. And I thought about it long and hard after that. And I thought, what could I have done differently? And in this particular instance, they walked into... Well, first of all, they walked into a dungeon. They walked into a dungeon, and basically, they didn't explore the whole first level, but rather as soon as they found the stairs down to the second level, they went down those stairs. And things started to get a little bit more difficult at that point. And they had to they didn't have to, but they chose to blow all their daily stuff, or not necessarily daily stuff, but all of their limited use stuff in order to get through a few encounters. And that's actually a more of a problem in modern systems, where they give you that kind of thing to just kind of alpha strike something and then keep going. And as a result, they ended up in a room which had lots of warning signs, like this room is really, really dangerous. And there were actually actual warnings in the level above. They just hadn't got to them, and so they wander in there, and it's basically a room with some dead salamanders that can be. It was basically they could be triggered by an Afriti who was trapped in an iron flask on a platform. And see at the far end of the room, they see this platform with the iron flask. They have no idea what's in it. They wander forward. I'm like, okay, as you get through the room, I give them all this creepy stuff where it gets hotter and hotter as they approach the platform, and they hear this strange whispering in Ignan, but nobody could understand Ignan. So it's like you hear this strange whispering out of these alcoves where you see this ash and bone as you get closer to this platform. And so they go up for it, and them being kind of like a kick in the door and beer and pretzels kind of group, they've been daring each other to do incredibly dangerous things all this game, and that's cool. That's cool. One of them dared the other to open the bottle, and they opened the bottle, and one poorly worded request later, and they're not necessarily fighting the Afriti, because the Afriti they said, basically do what you want and then be gone, or do what you're free, the bottle has no control over you. And so the Afriti was like, okay, I'm free, boom, here, have some salamanders, and see ya, and he left. But so all of a sudden they're facing salamanders, and mistakes were made. There was no way that this group could fight all of those salamanders in a row unless they got incredibly lucky. Some of them decided to basically stay in the room. Some of them decided to run. End result was that only a couple people actually got out. I was nice, and I didn't have the salamanders finish anybody off, so if they sat there on the floor and they managed to make their death saves, they woke up a little while later. And some of them woke up and got out, but end result was that they lost one of the major NPCs they had accompanying them, and one of the main characters, one of the player characters. So they're kind of dispirited at this point, although they understood that they'd basically been pushing each other to the edge and daring each other to step closer to the edge, and eventually somebody was going to fall off that edge. Well, guess what? And so they seemed in relatively good spirits, but it was not great for morale overall. So I'm like, okay. So scheduling issues aside, it caused the patron game to kind of not necessarily shrink permanently, but we got a couple players. We got one player that goes out from time to time, so he misses some schedules. So I designed a quick little thing where they can go into a quick rescue scene, and they can go down and they can rescue this cleric and add this cleric as an NPC to sit in the back and heal them. And they're not a high level cleric; they're starting at level 1. But hey, it's cleric you can go rescue. I even gave them the mission. Okay, there's some bandits out there in the woods. Since there's just the two of you around, you can go ahead and see about finding out what you can about the bandits, If you can rescue them, great. If not, bring me information. That's what the guy that gave the quest said. And so they go out there. They find the bandit fort, and I knew I was dealing with only 2 characters, and I knew that one of those characters was brand new, level 1. The other one was level 4 with a really nice magic sword, really nice build. And so I'm thinking, maybe they can take on a level 1 encounter and a level 2 encounter. So I designed it around basically that. And so you get not even a level 1 encounter at the front of the base, where you've got several bandits in kind of like a fortified wooden palisade. And you've got some wooden towers up there. So the group goes up there, they get surprised, they manage to catch these bandits unaware, and it's looking pretty good. They're basically mowing these bandits down. They're using the trees for cover, which I applaud them for, and just the 2 of them. And they basically face roll these bandits out front. And then there's like a cave, and the cave's got the bandit leader and a priest or whatever. Real low level priest. I think it was just basically an acolyte. And then beyond them, I had kind of like a non-combat encounter where they met the bandit's pet and had to talk the pet. The pet being an intelligent monster, and had the opportunity to avoid combat by talking to the pet. They didn't even get that far. What happened was they started out using tactics, ducking behind trees, coming out of cover, sniping people, going around, circling around, and they just steamrollered these bandits right off the bat. So two of them left to flee towards the cave, and so our 2 brave heroes come out of the woods, having slaughtered what bandits they could. They find the doors have been closed by those 2 people who fled. And then instead of trying to, send one of the people to go ahead and try to climb the palisade walls, they're not that high. They're like maybe 10, 15 feet. They're climbable, maybe not easily climbable, but they're climbable. So instead of sending somebody up to scout out, they decide, okay, what we're going to do is we're just going to chop through the gate. I'm like, yeah, really? And they're like, yeah, okay. So they go ahead and they chop through the gate. And they open the gate up, and it's basically like a really crude gatehouse. So you've got like a wooden building, and they see through this courtyard, and there's a long house here and a long house here, and then the cave entrance on the far side. And in the cave entrance, they see the 2 archers the 2 bandits with bows that they chased away, and they see the captain there. And they see this little acolyte kind of hiding behind the cave wall. And this cave is starts out narrow and then opens up like this. So they see them across there. It's not a huge distance, but it's more than 1 round of movement. And I'm even pretty clear. There's a house here and a house here, and they're not adjacent to the walls of the palisade. They're set aside from the walls of the palisade. And I drew the map out for them, and they've got a clear shot towards that cave if they duck behind one of those long houses. And I didn't say that, but I made it pretty clear in terms of even the map drawing out. And this is why tactics are important, because they had been steamrolling this stuff all the way through, and then randomly the high-level fighter decides, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plant my butt right in the doorway. Corrected there. Right in the doorway. Plant my butt right in the doorway. Take out my crossbow and fire at these guys. Yeah, so he burned 2 or 3 turns just firing at not even the archers, at the leader of the bandits. And I was just kind of stunned, because it was like they were doing so well, ducking behind trees and such, and then all of a sudden he's like, okay, I'm just going to stand there and just slug it out at range. And I thought, well, the bandits aren't stupid. So they start, except for the leader just kind of stood there with his arms crossed, just kind of daring them to come at him. But so the 2 bandits with bows, and these aren't high level, these are literally just bandits from the monster manual. They're 1/8 whatever creatures. they're just dudes with bows and like scimitars or whatever. And so they fire at this guy that is standing there in the gatehouse with his crossbow. And then they scoot off to the side so they're not in the line of fire. And I'm thinking, surely that's going to give these people some sort of idea as to what to do. And I think it did give one of them an idea as to what to do. But unfortunately, it wasn't a high-level fighter. And so he just basically sat there taking hits from these guys. And then they duck out of sight. And so he'd take his crossbow up and shoot at the leader, and usually miss, because even though he's a decent level fighter, he's not got a really high dexterity or anything. So he's downing healing potions and just taking pot shots, and he's not even ducking back into cover. It's like he was a dwarf, yeah, but even a couple, even like moving 10 feet out, taking a shot, and then moving back behind cover, he wasn't even doing that. And then eventually they did basically kind of run up, but instead of running around the sides, they kind of ran through the middle, and it was another wipe, and they got killed largely by these two bandits, because they spent so much time basically taking pot shots at one another across this field. So it was very disheartening, because this was like 2 sessions in a row where they'd been basically wiped, and I was sitting there going, well, is it my numbers? The first one, yeah, it was a higher CR than they could handle. They had a chance to avoid it, and they had chances to run, and a lot of them took it. But this next one I'd explicitly designed so that they could handle it at their level. But it was tactics. It was basic tactics that ruled the day. And so I mean this is kind of like a rambling story that I would usually put in a RPG, RPG crawlers, RPG story time, but my point is that at the end of the day, if you're a player, use what options are available to you. And I'm not talking about just what's written in your character sheet. I'm not talking about just abilities and powers. Use the options that are available to you. If the DM puts something in the room, make use of it. If there's like a bottleneck in a doorway, make use of that. Remember that you can duck around out of sight and make them break and try and come to you. By comparison, I've started putting my Tomb of Annihilation run up. Some of the players I have in my Tomb of Annihilation game are very, very well versed in tactics. For instance, we've got an archer that after he takes his shot, he'll hit the ground behind something, because dropping prone is basically free, and so he'll maneuver himself to where he's got not only cover but complete cover, take his shot, hit the deck. When it's his turn again, nobody's able to shoot him because he's got full cover. So they've either got to come around this way and flank the rest of the party, or, whatever. And then he'll pop up, use his hat. He'll take the penalty to stand up because he's not really doing anything but taking another shot and then hitting the deck. Even basic stuff like that will help immensely in the long run. If you're playing 5th edition, there's some 5th edition, there's some combat maneuvers that are available in 5th edition, and a lot of the 5th edition stuff is not spelled out. A lot of it is basically DM's decision. But there are some things that are actually spelled out in the player's handbook that a lot of people overlook. I had a goblin just run up and try and shove someone down in my Tomb of Annihilation game. And when he tried that, the fact that he could do that, the players were like, oh wow, goblins can do that? And I was like, dude, anyone can try it. Anyone can try and push you down. And they were like, it was like a light turned on. Basic tactics like that don't boil down to just an exchange of numbers. If you're just okay, I attack, okay, they attack, okay, I attack back, then you may as well be playing a video game. I love video games, but you may as well be playing one of those if you're not going to take advantage of what the DM gives you. And even some video games now, you can take cover. You can go, I mean, yeah, I say now, I mean, for the last almost, 20 years or so. But role-playing games, you don't see it quite as much. But in role-playing games now, some of them, you can go ahead and take cover. You can duck behind stuff. You can fall prone and get out of the way. Fallout did it way back when. But take those ideas and apply them to your basic combats. Make them more interesting. Not only make them more interesting, but hey, maybe it'll let you survive something that would otherwise be unsurvivable. And DMs, don't be afraid to use tactics on your monsters either. Maybe it'll give your players some ideas. Maybe it won't, but maybe it will. If your monsters start doing things like, taking cover, they should. Even though they're monsters, they want to live too, for the most part. Some undead don't, some constructs don't. But like your average goblin is not going to just stand and slug. So keep those tactics in mind. Tactics are important in RPGs. And I'm only rambling about this because I was very... After that stuff happened in my patron game, and it's since recovered. They've since recovered, and they're getting back on track. But ever since that happened in my patron game, I was really disheartened, and I took a long, hard look at what was going wrong and such. And all I can do is suggest that, players use tactics in your role-playing games. If you aren't already. I know a lot of groups really, really do it well. Really, really congeal well. But I've encountered just as many people that just sit there like it's a video game, just attack, counter, and that makes for boring combat. And it makes for hard combat, way harder than it should be. Anyway, I've talked about RPGs for a while. I guess that's why they call me the RPG crawler. But I wanted to take some time out to talk about a non-RPG thing. And if you are not interested in non-role-playing game stuff, you can go ahead and either skip to the end or just consider this my outro. I'll talk to you guys later, or I'll do videos for you guys later. I'm sure you won't miss it. Anyway, those of you who've been watching for a while may be aware that I'm not exactly a comic book guy. I'm not your typical geek that's interested in everything. I'm not your typical nerd that's interested in everything. I just never really got into comics. A lot of people will jump into the comics, and for those more to the point, I'm usually not into graphic novels, and I'm not into usually manga. But I recently made an exception. And that exception, a lot of people already know about this artist. But that exception was largely made because I heard a couple years ago now about a manga artist called Junji Ito. And they are a horror artist. And they put out... they've been putting out really, really creepy, twisted stuff for decades now, since like the late 80s, I think. So, why am I bringing this up? Well, my birthday passed recently, and I don't want to talk about how old I am. I'm feeling super old. But, I look older than I am. But I feel older still. Anyway, so I went ahead and picked up some manga for the first time ever for me. And I am really glad I did. I went ahead and just I went and treated myself for my birthday, and I picked up some Junji Ito stuff. I picked up Fragments of Horror, and I picked up the big three that he does. I picked up Gyo, which I have actually read in electronic format before, but I haven't actually, had the actual hardcover. It's a hardcover. It actually was released they're usually in I guess they're called light novels or something. I don't know. Usually released in volumes, Anyway, I picked up Yo. I picked up Uzumaki, which I'm actually in the process of reading right now. And I picked up, I think it's called Tomiya, but it's actually Tomiya or whatever. And this is the first time I've bought manga. It's the first time I've actually bought manga. And don't be fooled by me saying I've read it in electronic format. That was not me actually owning it. That was me seeing it on somebody else's tablet while I was borrowing it and saying, ooh, this is neat. And that's actually how I got into... That's actually how I looked at Junji Ito and really kind of was like, wow, okay, this is impressive. Yeah, his stuff, a lot of this stuff, well, at least the big three here have been adapted into movies of various forms. Uzumaki has been made into a movie outright. I've seen the movie. I've heard that the movie was not as good as the book. I liked the movie. And now I'm reading the book, and I'm liking the book. So I don't know what to say about that. I liked them both. As I said, I'd read Go before. I have not seen the movie on this one. I think it's an anime. Not 100% on that. Don't quote me on that, but I do know that they put together a movie on it. This is creepy as hell. And then Tomei hasn't really been made into a single movie. Rather, there's been an entire series of Tomei movies that have been put out since like 2000 or whatever, maybe even before that. And rather than being a linked, cohesive storyline, some of them are linked, some of them aren't. They basically have unconnected stories based on the same character, which has unconnected stories based on the same character in the book. So it's not really... It's one of those ones where you've got a recurring character but different stories. And I think that's the way in the book. I haven't read it yet. This is the last one I'm going to read. It's also the largest collection I'm going to read. So why am I talking about this on an RPG channel? Well, first of all, because I like it, and because it's my vlog, and I'm going to talk about what I want. Second of all, because a lot of this stuff I was straight up inspired to use a lot of stuff from these books in some of the RPGs that I do, that I've run. Some of the tabletop stuff that I've run, I've gone ahead and used, not necessarily directly, but it's really inspired me on some of the horror stuff that I run. Some of it is really almost Lovecraftian. I don't know. I don't have it, but I think it's like... I can't remember the name. There's one that he wrote that is basically about this intelligent planet that starts coming towards Earth and then just basically messes everything up, and eventually, I'm not going to spoil it, but really, really twisted stuff happens. And that is very, very almost Lovecraftian in nature, even though it doesn't have the huge... Well, yeah, it's got tentacled creatures, I guess, but it doesn't have the individual elder horrors. It's like an entire planet. It's worth a read. And it is... if you're looking to implement some cosmic horror type stuff, that one is really, really, really nice for that kind of thing. Tomei is... And I'm probably mispronouncing that. It is about a girl that can't die, and she drives people that are by her insane. This book is neat, or the concepts in here are really nice for if you're doing like any kind of like succubus type play or whatever in your... If you've got a villain in there that is corruptive, that is manipulative, and that is somehow supernatural but blending in at the same time. There's some scenes in here that would turn basically your character like a vampire or succubus or something, if you're going that route in like D&D types of stuff, from simply yet another trope into something at once different and twisted, and as they should be for evil extraplanar creatures. Gyo is about basically fish. Well, it's about more, but it starts with fish coming out of the sea and basically showing up on land, and they're attached to like biomechanical monstrosities. Another good series of concepts that can be used for horror gaming, whether you're talking about D&D, medieval fantasy stuff, or even modern stuff. Even if you don't like a lot of this stuff, I say I use it for inspiration. You don't need to take the actual scenes and scenarios out of these games, or not out of these games. What am I saying? Out of these books. But it serves as a starting point for inspiration, and then just get your mind working. And then finally, Uzumaki is about a town infested by spirals. Much creepier than it seems. That's what the book is about, and yet it's much creepier than it seems. What I would say is this would be more... I would use this as inspiration for maybe an insidious force rather than for a monster. Like a town that starts revolving around a concept or something. And the way that it affects the people in that town, I would draw inspiration from this book very easily for that kind of thing. Anyway, yeah. So I went ahead and broke. I went ahead and broke long my tradition of not buying manga of any sort, and I went and picked these up, and I don't regret it a bit. They are excellent. But yeah, I'm going to put links up on those because those are worth a read if you haven't already. And not sponsored or anything, but I'm going to mention Crunchyroll here because Junji Ito Masterpiece Collection, I think it's called, actually now has an anime. I'm going to talk about that for a little while. And if you're not an anime fan, I've probably already lost you by now. And they've taken some of his short works, not the big long-term stuff, but some of his shorter works over the years, and then made them into anime. And at first I was thinking, this is gonna blow. So I started watching it. It doesn't blow. It's maybe not as impactful as the books because some of the stuff has been sanitized out. Some of the really, really wild illustrations have been sanitized out. But it is still pretty creepy, and it does give you kind of an indication as to the themes that he does, because a lot of them are taken directly from his short stories over the years. I do recommend that if you're a fan of anime and horror at all, and you have not heard of Junji Ito, to go ahead and you are a fan of horror, to go ahead and take a look at it. The first several episodes are available free on the Crunchyroll's free thing, so it won't cost anything to check it out. But yeah, I do recommend that one. It's not a lot of manga. Supposedly, I'm not a manga aficionado because it's evidenced by the fact I've only just bought these. But I've heard a lot of manga loses it when it loses something when it gets translated to anime. This is no exception, but it's still pretty good. I thought it was better. I thought it was better than the film adaptations for some of the stuff, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, if you're a fan of horror, and you haven't checked them out, then I recommend you do check them out. Especially if you like grotesque stuff, not necessarily gore, although there is a lot of it in some of those, but like weird, unsettling stuff, like really weird. He does some gross out stuff. And he does some unsettling stuff, and he does some really just plain strange stuff. But it's the visual style that really lends a lot to it. Anyway, yeah, go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. I'll go ahead and wrap it up here. I've got a couple more of these things to do. I gotta catch up on my Let's Plays now that I've got my new hard drives, and I finally can. I gotta catch up on those. God, man, every time I say I'm gonna catch up on them, something happens out of the blue. Anyway. Thank you for watching. This has been the RPG Crawler with my RPG miscellaneous rambling vlog covering all kinds of stuff. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you've got any feedback, comment if you've got any feedback on anything I've talked about here, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. If you're feeling particularly generous, I do have a Patreon at patreon.com/RPGcrawler that goes to supporting the channel. And actually goes to stuff like the whole reason I was able to recover so quickly from losing that hard drive was the fact that I had a Patreon and I could just instantly order some replacement hardware. Appreciate each and every one of you that give. Thank you very much. I couldn't do. I could literally at this point say I could not do the channel like I have been without you guys, and I'm just upset that I haven't been able to do more. Anyway, until next time, take care and goodbye.